Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming to our office. Hope you guys are enjoying the day. Thank you, Smokey, for joining me with the panel here. How many times have you been to Korea now? Like, I see you all the time. Smokey and Bera loves Korea.
It's just to come visit you, man. No, this is only my second time in town. Whenever I do come, I try to make a good trip out of it, and not just have it be a fly-by-night affair. But Korea's wonderful. I had some friends from university that live here as well, so it's been pretty easy to come and catch up and get to see the stuff in and outside of the conference. So it's always a pleasure. And then having Francis on our team, who used to be the head of conference for KBW, makes our lives a lot easier as well because I don't feel like a complete tourist. I get a little bit of the red carpet thanks to him and guys like you, of course.
Of course. Obviously, Berachain is one of the biggest initiatives happening in the industry right now, and I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with what's getting developed in the ecosystem projects. But for today, since we're doing fireside chat with a smaller group here, why don't we go more into origin story of the beginning, humble beginning of Bera? Why you guys started this, how you guys got together, the whole NFT stories behind. Could you share more?
Yeah, 100%, man. The funniest part about Berachain is that it wasn't supposed to happen. Berachain started as nothing more than an NFT project of a bunch of bears consuming cannabis for no apparent reason, apart from the fact that we thought it was kind of funny. I think the added irony to any of this is that none of our co-founders actually even smoke. We just thought that the idea of bears with bongs was an entertaining concept. This is sort of during the 2021 NFT fun times. For context, we'd all been in the space for the better part of a decade. I used to spend time in the Valley, was previously a founder in healthcare, then a VC, before moving to deeply into crypto. And we've been buying ETH and Bitcoin since 2015-16 and getting wrecked on shitcoin since 2017-2018. And we saw that this sort of upcoming NFT boom combined with the advent of interesting new DeFi projects in that summer 21 timeframe just had an opportunity for cool new stuff to occur. And I think that there was a combination of a couple different factors that led to Berachain starting. One was we saw this start of more interesting NFTs beyond monkey profile pictures. That was parallel TCG and these higher quality assets being generated and these virtual worlds that didn't feel like super corny metaverse, but actually felt like things that we could understand. Magic the Gathering, Hearthstone on chain, combined with this massive DeFi revitalization and stuff like Curve and Frax and Alchemix and Olympus DAO and these cult-like communities that rallied around things. So we thought it would be really funny if we just took some of those communities that we were hanging out with and decided to make an NFT collection that some of them might like. And we thought, bears were funny enough, so we started there. And we basically raffled off these NFTs. There were only 100 of them in a whole bunch of different Discord servers of these DeFi heads. And what we ended up having by accident was effectively this confluence of the far left curve and the far right curve. You had people who were hanging out in fairly sophisticated DeFi servers, but you also had people who were risk-on enough to buy a JPEG of a bear smoking weed for no apparent reason. And over time, we thought to ourselves, how can we iterate on this? How can we make this more interesting? What can we do to make this not just another corny, lame NFT project? And we were like, okay, what if we make the bears rebase, similar to Olympus or some of those old and loved Ponzi's of the past? So we said, okay, what if it was possible to have the original collectors become rewarded and supply to be distributed more and more over time? So that led over time to about 2,000-3,000 JPEGs of bears in various forms and manifestations. And what happened was, along this way, as we talked to the community more and more, and actually spent time in the Discord and talking to real users who were, on one hand, very DeFi-centric, but on the other hand, some were running their own nodes, some were validating on other networks, et cetera, while remaining active in a very multi-chain environment, we found that there were meaningful, problems being raised that we thought we actually had a chance of solving. We saw that there was a massive trade-off between liquidity and security that really existed at the heart of many of these proof-of-stake networks. And stuff like EigenLayer and stuff like liquid staking tokens and Lido, et cetera, has 100% moved that in the right direction. But we thought that there was a very odd, set of alignment issues when one who's contributing to security of a network was inherently in some manner taking away from its liquidity or what could be available on the network. And believing that liquidity is really the lifeblood of on-chain activity and everything is downstream of it, we thought that it would be very interesting to take this community that we've built, along with, I'd say our whatever you can call our tech expertise, and use that to build a network that really embedded liquidity into the core of it and actually aligned liquidity and security at the core level. I think around the same time, we noticed that there was a whole bunch of our friends who were building applications and trying to find out which chain should be home, that were really experiencing issues in actually having a reason to build on chain A versus chain B. Of course, there were these mercenary grant programs. There was Avalanche Rush. There was Near's $800 million ecosystem fund. There were a lot of things that went up and then down very quickly. And I think that apart from these mercenary grants, sort of filling this Mad Libs-like role of, can I be the balancer of Metis? Can I be the Aave of Near, etc.? There was very little impetus for a group to build on chain A versus chain B. So I think the last part of the question that we really tried to answer as we architected Berachain over time is how do we build a network that actually empowers those who matter arguably the most in the ecosystem, which is to say the people building interesting applications and the users of those applications, and how do we actually sort of create as minimally leaky of a funnel as possible to drive value into the people who are growing crypto as a whole. And I think that's sort of how we got here. So started with bare JPEGs, ended up with a blockchain. Now you have a dude in a fucking panda mask on stage. It's a lot of weird things have happened so far.
I know what a story, right? And in that journey, how did you go from the initial small team at Bera and NFT to building out this whole suite of Berachain ecosystem and a team? How did you carefully select who to hire in the early days as you decided that okay, we're gonna build a proof of liquidity and an actual chain now?
Yeah, so I think that there's a few different ways that we approach this. On one hand, the engineering side, we all studied engineering at the University of Waterloo, then went and spent our time in the Bay Area or served our sentences. So the nice thing was that from a lot of networks that we developed in past lives and during our time just fucking around in crypto, we were lucky to be able to meet a number of strong engineers who were pretty excited about what was being built and saw just a confluence of on one hand, far left curve and far right curve, people who wanted to build something incredible and hopefully with massive potential, but who were also deeply unserious. And having spent a lot of time in a past life in a very serious industry in biotech where I could not pull up with a panda suit on a stage, I think that it was a very nice change of pace for myself and Papa as well, who has a background in medtech as well. So I guess that was how we started on the tech side, and Dev Bear, who leads our engineering team, spent a number of years at Apple as a lower-level systems engineer, so understood distributed systems and network consensus very well. But on the ecosystem side, I think we tried to take as much of a hands-on approach as possible. I think we saw throughout this L1, L2 rotation world that a lot of ecosystem builders were taking this very laissez-faire attitude towards things. There was this belief that if you build it, people will come, and that people want to occupy new block space, and that everyone is excited to build on a new chain if there's enough money raised and if you say enough buzzwords a few times. And I think our staunch belief was that that's entirely bullshit, and that if you want people to build in an ecosystem, you have to go out and show them why it matters and why they have an opportunity to win. And even more importantly, how one can go about setting a very high bar of quality in the ecosystem. I think that a lot of the ones of the past have really been plagued by just this 6 to 12 months of nothing interesting, half a year to get Trader Joe on Avalanche kind of thing, and then it's just a bunch of Uniforks and Aave forks, and maybe there's an OpenSea type of thing if you're lucky. But there are very few times, until I'd say in the last year or two, where you'd have a new chain go live, and then you'd actually see something interesting there just take off and have that shelling moment and that pull to actually bring new users into the network and make it worth their time and effort. So our goal was really, can we build a team in whatever Moneyball style possible, and can we help curate an ecosystem, not build it ourselves, but just give those builders as much in terms of time, resource, efforts, attention as possible to allow them to really succeed. And I think that the biggest takeaway that I've had from this is that there's really no substitute for just doing the work. I think it's not a sexy thing to say, but I think there's no substitute for just taking the time to spend hours and hours with builders to actually help them work through everything they're going through, whether that's go to market, whether that's pitching, fundraising, marketing, whatever that might be, and being that extension of their team and being that helping hand that they can call on, whether there's something blowing up or whether it's the smoothest sailing possible. So that's really how we've been, taking the approach. And I think that what we've just tried to drill into the entire team, who's now 50, 60 plus, is just to take very extreme ownership of things, right? There's never an excuse for things going wrong. It's up to you to create the future you want, right?
That's awesome. Obviously, as an investor in Berachain, we've been meeting various teams that are building on Berachain. And one thing that I personally noticed was that every founder have some sort of story with you guys with the founders either worked together before, coming from a same neighborhood, and they all have a very interesting characters too, in cultural ways or their approach to the market or consumer approach. How do you find these builders? I just find people who are building on Bera or people who gravitate towards Bera ecosystem to be quite differentiated from any other, layer ones or other chains.
Yeah, I think that's part of why we've not tried to brand ourselves, I think, in a similar manner to a lot of other networks that have existed to date. And I don't mean that in like a pick-me manner. I simply mean that in that we realized that based on the team that we had, based on our beliefs, that the way for us to win was not simply by trying to run the same playbook over and over again. We were not going to win by taking the SWE approach. We're not going to win by taking the Polygon approach, though there's certainly things to be learned in each case. We have a somewhat a weird combination of Brevin Howard and Milady vibes, in that you have like a deep trad background in many cases and a number of team members who have built and scaled massive companies and protocols in both trad worlds and crypto, and you have a bunch of people who have like grown up in the trenches on Discord, right? And I think that like internet native culture, if you will, really allowed us to help, I'd say, attract a group of people who resonated with those same ideals, right? So I think that, in the past we've had people ask us, why wouldn't someone just build on Base or Solana instead? And I think that there's many people who will be well served by doing so. But I think that Bera sort of tends to differentiate on a slightly cursed but very competent, in many cases, culture, in which, the people who are building on Bera are all in most cases of what I've seen. And I think that that's actually been the biggest thing that we try to screen for. Because especially as the network scales, there's more and more times where someone will just say, hey, I want to use building on this network as arbitrage of some manner, right? To gain attention, to gain hype, to help fundraise, to be the first X on Y, etc.
We definitely notice a lot of that right now.
100%, right? And I'm sure you're seeing that in other ecosystems like Monad, so on and so forth, right? And in our side, we wanted to select against the groupies, if you will, right? We wanted to select for people who are absolute passionate zealots, and then sometimes they come from past lives and have bet on us in other contexts and say, hey, like Smokey and the guys and the whole team are going to ride again, and we fully believe in them. In other cases, they're just fully pilled on the concept of proof of liquidity and the ability to actually drive more value to their application by living on Berachain than anywhere else. So I think that our goal has been to select for builders that really want to believe in something, and really do have a audacious vision. And in most cases are the kind of people who you'd want to go to Thanksgiving dinner with, right? Like there's a lot of, venture tropes about who you'd want to have on your team. I think a lot of those tropes also extend to an ecosystem, right? Is it someone you could spend a car ride with? Is it someone you take along with you to a wedding, yada, yada, yada? I
definitely enjoy your Bera dinners at every city you guys go. Yeah.
Thank you, man. Right. So I think it's select for people who you want to work with, and it's a decentralized network. At the end of the day, anyone is free to build with us, and we will support every and any builder that comes along to Berachain. But we'll also be very transparent about our expectations and how we think about it. And we care a lot about, I think, high loyalty and brand value to some extent. Which is to say, you see some groups on Berachain that are very in-your-face Bera, like they are, yelling Puff Paw, they're Gummy, they're Kodiak, whatever it might be. On the other hand, there's folks who are building just cool new stuff, and it is slightly Bera tinged, if you will, but it's its own path. And we're happy to support any of those things as long as they believe that they can drive value to the Bera ecosystem. If they're deploying their first instance on Berachain, if they're issuing their token on Berachain, if they're doing stuff that helps us really move the bar forward as a whole.
Could you mention or share any specific teams that are building that you only see on Bera? Like not just on other decks, not just on other perp, but this is very unique to Bera.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a few that I'm really excited about. One's actually a Korean homegrown project, team called Exponents. I think, as someone who grew up believing a lot in DeFi and who, was first brought into the space, I'd say, by DeFi, I think they're building one of the most interesting things in terms of effectively Oracle-free leverage on long-tail assets or shitcoins, whatever you want to call it. And that's just the surface of it. What's actually more interesting is they add an incentive layer to directional longs or shorts. So you actually have the ability for the first time to incentivize someone to basically take a position that is not just LPing or providing liquidity or serving as the house in a purpose protocol, but rather allows you to actually build these markets that I'd say, capture the tribalism of different crypto communities as well, right? You can have a bonk with pair in which someone is effectively incentivizing people to go long on bonk, and maybe they have a position where that's very EV positive if the price moves just by 1 or 2% versus that incentive value, right? I think stuff like that, they're fun new games are interesting. I think there's people who are building very interesting things on the consumer or more like user-facing side, and I think something that we spend a lot of time thinking about is people use the word grow the pie a lot, and sometimes it's corny, but I think it's important at the end of the day for us to realize that crypto needs users, and it can't just be the same 3 to 10,000 people circle jerking on DeFi protocols, as much fun as that can be. We do need it to be easy for someone to actually pick up crypto, whether they know they're using it super well or not. And I think there's abstracted approaches, but there's also elegant approaches that feel culturally correct. So for us, one of those that's extremely fun is a group that actually announced their fundraise today. It's called Puffpaw. They're actually building the first quit smoking to earn DPIN project. And it's a team that shipped tens of millions of vapes in the past for leading companies, and is actually building a vape to earn product, which allows you to earn more tokens as you decrease the amount of nicotine that you vape with. Now, I think you could build this on a number of different networks, and I think that there are incentive schemes that are uniquely possible on Berachain, but this is just a group that felt very culturally correct, and that it's doing something a little bit weird and controversial, but also with a potentially really interesting endpoint. To the same extent, there's something called Over-Under, which is a bunch of ex-folks from the NSA and Robinhood who've effectively built a computer vision-powered prediction market, allowing you to train AI data on various Twitch streamers to actually see all the different actions that they take in-game over hours and hours of footage, and then automatically create the odds of any in-game event occurring, such that one can say, okay, is X person going to get 10 kills in this game? Are you going to use this champion in League? Are you going to survive this many moments in COD Zombies, whatever it is? And stuff like that ends up being very culturally correct in the Berachain environment as well, right? Because it's something that can easily reach tens or hundreds of thousands of users through a simple Chrome extension, but it's also something that can benefit from proof of liquidity to actually bootstrap those initial pools for capital and bootstrap those initial houses, if you will. So I think for us, it's been a combination of the far left and the far right, as I've said many times. There's people building deeply interesting, I'd say DeFi products, including hash portfolio companies like Concrete, which is one of the sharpest teams I've ever met. A dude named Nick, who is an Oxford-trained surgeon, then served as a VP at Point72 for 3 years, is built like a brick shithouse and can probably bench press 4 plates, and is also just an incredibly competent, manager and I'd say executive, but is also building the first system for credit default swaps on chain, which I think can unlock a completely new level of financial sophistication for DeFi markets. So these opportunities are few and far in between, and we do our absolute best to have as many things that we believe could be the new meta exist on Bera first.
That's amazing. Obviously, the title for today is how you're going to shake up the world. What are some of the remaining or future milestones that people should be excited about? What makes you have such a high conviction that Berachain will be the one, to come to the market?
Yeah, man. I think that I try to keep a balanced perspective on all things, right? I think that we've done as much as we can, whether it is building a strong ecosystem, accumulating strong backers, having a number of different initiatives, whether that be on the more traditional side with Brevin and Nomura, et cetera, on the RWA side with teams in Qatar, or in the deep degen side, like I've mentioned, with different groups who actually want to build these DeFi-oriented and consumer-facing products. So I think we've tried to line up our ducks properly. We've done everything we can to build a team who is, I'd say, just hell-bent and mission-driven to win. And I think that part of that also comes for selecting against grifters. And what I mean by that is that crypto, as I think a lot of us are aware, is a game with very weird incentives, right? You effectively launch a token, you IPO when the product just starts being developed. You end up with a lot of people who want to play short-term games, which is definitely not the healthiest for the course of the industry. And I think that a lot of what we think about as we select our team and as we built that out over time has been, how do we have as many people who are here not because they need to be, not because they need stable employment or because this job is what keeps them with their lights on, but because they want to be, and because they wake up every morning and think about how they can take that chip on their shoulder, if you will, and translate it into something that allows them to win, right? And then I think finally the part that almost resonates with me the most is that Berachain really is the first chain or application development environment that is built to drive value to the people who in turn contribute the most value to the network, right? Proof of liquidity means that as the chain operates, as inflation occurs, as blocks are produced, those aren't just going to the validator set and in the case of DPoS to users, those are going into the applications and the ecosystem itself. So you actually have a really symbiotic relationship between the groups that are securing the chain and actually making it function and the people that are building on it. So at the end of the day, it's really putting the users and the applications first. And I think that is really what does matter a ton when building an ecosystem, because it's really tough to make it as an application. It's tough to build a traditional company. It's even weirder in crypto where you both have to fundraise or build an app, then seed your own liquidity, and then find a way to make people actually care about you. So in our world, I guess the analogy we see is it's almost like the government helping to turbo or subsidize some of the best businesses that are being most productive for the economy. It's like if you have an app store, the people who are using those apps the most are the ones who then get to choose which other apps are added to it. It's really a system that rewards activity and rewards the group that contributes the most value. And I think that when you combine that with the barbell that is Berachain of a far left curve, just approaching cult of folks who just believe strongly in the vision, who are yelling "ooga booga" on Twitter and sometimes in the audience, and are just out there riding for something, even at the earliest stages, that has formed over the last couple of years. And you combine that with a very interesting financial mechanism in a very well set up technological environment in terms of a fully EVM identical L1 with single slot finality, then I think you end up in a good place to do well. I don't ever want to be deluded or to ever just say like, hey, I know Berachain is going to be number one. Like I think that there are very real competitors, and I think there's very real established winners in Bitcoin, ETH, it's even more so Solana over time, right? But I think that I want us to be able to go out there and take a real swing at things, and I think that we've done our very best to set ourselves up for success along the way.
Awesome. As you mentioned or described it, there's a whole cult around Bera community that are working with you and supporting you. There's a lot on your shoulder. Is there any time that you're kind of nervous as a founder on some of the future things? Obviously, it's a big, ambitious project, and there's a lot to be done. And the market's fast moving right now, and it's one of the most volatile time right now. What makes you kind of concerned about any market conditions or anything within or outside of Berachain that you think could be certain things that community should be worrying about or resolve issues down the line?
Yeah, I think that there's so many things that we've done wrong along the way, and I think that the thing that gives me the most comfort and also at times the most stress is self-awareness, right? I think we try to be relatively self-aware of where we are, of the things that we do very well and the things that we don't do too well. And I think that we try not to gaslight the world into thinking that we're perfect. So I think an air of authenticity goes a very long way, because I think I've seen many of our counterparts that try to paint the rosiest picture of all, when I think market participants are getting smarter. We've seen alts crumble. We've seen many things dump over the last few months. We realized that ETH was below 2,500 a couple days ago. I was like, oh, damn, right? We don't look at charts nowadays. But I do think that as a founder, my only answer to these things is to control for what we can control for, right? We can't broadly affect the macro climate. We can just do our best to build the best product possible, to empower the best builders possible, and I think to be real about things. And for me, I think that's just a matter of like having a pretty unending work ethic. And I think that's a matter of having no off switch. Like I think that kind of as I said earlier, there is really no substitute for doing the work. And I don't think that work-life balance is a thing that someone should be optimizing for in this case. But like my life is, I wake up, I answer Telegram messages, I eat, I go to the gym, I play with my dog, I say hi to my girlfriend, I spend like 10 hours at the office and get back on the grind. I think that is what you have to do if you want to win. And I think there's many, many cases where you can do that and still lose. But I think that you just kind of have to like swing with all your might, right? And that's just very much the effort, the approach that we try to take to things. It's that, and also to be very thoughtful about all the different aspects of the game, such that you never end up blindsided by the lack of existence of one of those things that should be there.
Yeah, I mean, I've been building on Hash for about 7 years now, and what is work-life balance? I think life is what it is, and just work around the clock. And we have 100+ portfolio across probably all time zones now, and there's a lot on stake, and especially for you building the layer one and the ecosystem, I'm sure there's more of that pressure. So, fully understood. Maybe as we wrap up, any kind of guidance for a lot of the developers and builders here on how to participate and contribute in Berachain ecosystem?
Yeah, on one hand, I think that you guys should always feel free to reach out to myself or other team members. There's a number of us who are pretty easy to find. There's Ella and Leslie somewhere in the crowd from our team who are on the ground in the APAC region. So Ella's in Singapore, Leslie's in China. Myself and a lot of the team members tend to be pretty easy to reach on Twitter. Slide into our DMs. We do our best to be as responsive as possible. And really, if you're building something cool, new, and interesting, like, we want to work with you. I think that it's very tough to actually categorize what is a cool, new, and interesting app. And I think that as I spend more and more time talking to my friends, it's easy to get a little bit like doomery and jaded. But I think that when you look at ticking one of 2 or 3 different boxes, is this a fee printer for a sustainable or somewhat sustainable reason? Is this something that has a potential to really onboard hundreds of thousands or millions of users in a non-bullshit way? Is this something that can really become a foundational product in an ecosystem, or just this lodestone that everything else can be built around, somewhat like GMX and Arbitrum was in the past? Then I think a lot of those things are cool. And then simply, is this something that you feel can move the space forward, whatever that means to you, right? We're there to support. And for us, we've got mainnet coming up in the next, before the end of the year. So we've got a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross. And we're setting up what I think will be probably the most, in my opinion, a biased one, the most exciting sort of like launch program possible, that will be focused on allowing a lot of the ecosystem projects on Berachain to not suffer that cold start problem that many other ecosystems have seen over time, but rather to really come out the gates roaring. And we'll be working with some folks within this crowd and many others to make that really a reality. So we're heads down, but very excited for the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Smokey, for joining us, and thank you, everyone, for coming to Hash Talk. Oh, sorry. Yeah.